Hi, this is John. In this short talk, I'm going to talk about going beyond connecting the dots and connecting strategy to execution. I've used these phrases myself. Lots of people use these phrases, but I think there's more to it, and I want to explore it. So, first of all, humans are very good translators. We are able to take things that are in our context and translate it to other people, and translate it to other people. There's local contexts here. Think of this as a company, and everyone has their own context, and there's department context, and there's team context. Humans are actually very good at translating things in and out of their particular context. The problem is, in a lot of companies, people are just asking for things and getting things, but it's not really helping them. So here we have this leader saying, you know, I want a summary of everything pivoted by these three objectives. And it kicks off this cycle of, well, I guess we got to fill out the spreadsheet. And another person says we have to fill out a spreadsheet. And then it goes all the way to the teams. And then the teams are like, no, 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 no. Another spreadsheet? All right, whatever. Okay, just as long as they stay off my back. They fill it out. And, the manager tweaks it a little bit and they fill it out and they tweak it again. And then they hand it off to this leader. And the leader's like, I just wanted to connect the dots. This seems kind of interesting, but it's not exactly what I wanted. But thanks, I got to go. I'm busy. And that doesn't work. Now, what also happens is people think that like a tool will solve this particular problem. I want a summary of everything pivoted by these objectives. And in comes this kind of transformation leader, and they say, well, the operations team has now purchased Acme Flow, and after careful configuration and enablement and the perfect configuration of Jira, we are now equipped to meet leadership requests. Okay, kind of looks like the same thing. Hey, I want this. Hey, everyone, use Acme Flow. And then the next person, like, hey, everyone, use Acme Flow. And they give it to the team. The team, it just looks like basically like a glorified spreadsheet anyway. They might as well fill it in a spreadsheet. And then this person is like, whatever, okay. And the person's like, looks okay, looks okay. The leader logs into Acme Flow, maybe, but more likely someone just pastes something into a PowerPoint here. And the leader's like, yeah, that kind of looks interesting. Actually, I've moved on to something else. We're more worried about, I don't know, revenue per engineer and whether we're going to do layoffs or something. If you know, you know. Okay, that's kind of messed up. And this kicks off a wicked spiral, right? Like if you've been in a company, you've probably seen this. It's like tool bankruptcy. New leader comes in. The new leader's like, oh, just put it in a spreadsheet. I'm tired of all this crap. Nothing makes sense. And then everyone puts it in a spreadsheet. And then after 2 or 3 years, like we finally purchased a tool. And then a new leader comes in and you kick off this kind of cycle, which doesn't work. Why is this connected to connect the dots and everything? All these efforts sometimes are efforts to connect the dots, right? People think that if they just put the data in the systems and then connect enough of the things that suddenly everything will make sense, but it kicks off this wicked cycle. So let's take another look at this. So in this image, we have some local contexts and we have these context adapters, right? Like at the boundaries of these particular contexts. And in the middle of the company, we kind of had the middleware, the shared language, the global norms, the accepted protocols. And so you can see at any given time, people are exchanging information between contexts. They are adapting things to make sense as it goes out and comes into their particular situation. And the organization has enough shared language and global norms to be able to at least add some consistency to that. Maybe they decide we're going to use OKRs or whatever, and that provides kind of a level of middleware. Of course, leaders are giving money out, and that's kind of an important part of this. But generally, you could think of an organization between local contexts, a more global context, context adapters, and then the middleware in the particular company. So if you use that perspective, communication here is more like people moving context between local contexts and sharing global context. They all have the global context, by the way, so you could think about it like that. And they're moving things along as they work. Now, an important point here is people say they want to see all the dots. Please, we need something to connect the dots, but no one really does. No one really wants that. They want to be able to see that when they need to see it. But most people just want to see their dots. They have questions. They want to be able to get answers from what's happening. There might be, some operations person that sees this as a thing of beauty. Most people in your organization, 95% of people don't want to see all the dots as they're working. They want to work comfortably in their local context and have things translated to them in a way that makes sense so that they can operate. It's very different than this idea that if you could just connect everything together, if you could just connect all the metrics together, if you could just define what strategy is, if you could just describe your 6-layer deep cascade, everything would be fixed. When you do that at any degree of accuracy, it becomes overwhelming because also you've got your issue about local context. There is a reason why things like this board work. And the reason why things like a board like this work are the rituals of a leadership team standing in front of it or people passing by it during the day, of being able to go up there and add a new item. Another reason why this works is that there's not stringent rules. Like there's a pink ticket up there. Some of these are big bets. Some are small bets. Some are tiny little blue bets. Doesn't matter, right? There's the middleware isn't constraining people into things that don't necessarily work. It provides the big picture without limiting people's ability to get into their local context and think about what they need to think about. But it is very, very hard work. I've been doing a lot of research with different product leaders about how they implement like the different systems or their product operating systems. And it's kind of incredible, right? That given the option between tools that force you to work one way or like a mono process across the company, there are companies that work just fine using long Google Docs as sort of bullet journals, right? Like every team, just keep it going, keep your cadences going, um, keep checking in with yourself over and over again, circulate this information, have it move through the different translation layers of the company so that people can understand what they're doing. There's a reason why you can run 1,000-person org out of a couple spreadsheets. It's not easy and it kind of breaks and it's not comfortable for everyone. But the reason why you can do that is not anything to do with the spreadsheet. It's more that someone has the intention and has created the kind of interfaces that allow that to be able to work. So what this means in a lot of cases is that some of these systems, they prioritize leaders over collaborators, right? So if all the collaborators enter the data in the system, the leaders will see what they need to see. Well, unfortunately, once it's gone across all those hops, the leaders don't even trust what they see. And it doesn't really make any sense to them. And then the new fire starts and the whole process repeats itself. Now, the other approach is to only cater to collaborators or the people on the front line. Now, if given an option, you'd want to do that because someone needs to get the work done. Unfortunately, that leaves leaders feeling like they're out of the loop. There's two real solutions to this in some sense, is the, humans as translation layers. It's hard for the managers. That's why I put the frowny face there, but it's probably necessary and works. And there's probably some in most companies, sort of some combination of these translation layers and then the middleware that exists within the company. And that's how they're able to operate. So neither of these work up at the top. What works is kind of some combination of the things down at the bottom. When you observe leaders who are successful at kind of getting their operations humming and people seeing what they need to see and the context that they need and seeing the dots that they need to see, you start seeing that this is actually a rather intentionally designed thing. It's a product or a platform. All these rituals, decisions, how power moves, the cognitive load teams are under, the inputs and outputs, the strategy, all these things are intentionally designed, even if that decision is to not worry about it. Maybe in a company, the way that you work something out is just have people work it out. That's an intentional thing. In other companies, maybe they use live documents to work things out. Both work if they're intentional and both fail if they're not intentional. So I like to think that whether you like it or not, you have some system working. It's either in your brain or you've written it down. I don't think one is necessarily better than the other, but it's there. But you think about it. You have operating principles. You have the strategic foundations, how you work. You have your organizational architecture. You have a communication framework. You have different workflows that you're using and need to support. You need to have a glossary or ontology of how things are working, the documents you use, the policies that you have, the cadences that you use, etc. So whether it's up in your brain or it's written down, these things are happening. In a startup, a minimally viable version of all these things is happening. In a massive company, you have other versions of these things happening. The same thing that goes for all these different capabilities, right? In any company, there's some kind of strategy development and refinement and pricing and packaging and industry awareness and market research. And you have to deploy your strategy. You have to set goals. You have to think about operational planning. You do have to think about some kind of communication of your strategy, etc. But in a startup, that might be all up in your head. All these things that you see here just live in people's heads, and that's completely fine. And then as you scale, the question is, can you keep doing that, or do you need to add some lightweight understanding to what's happening? One of the big challenges is that in some organizations, the organizational structure, the architecture have created massive numbers of dependencies. And sometimes in some domains, there's just inherent complexity in what they're doing, might be highly regulated or hardware and software. There's other things that relate to this. This is going to have a massive impact on how legible you need to make these things. When you have to get 2,000 people somewhat rowing in the same direction, but you have teams that are fairly decentralized and fairly independent, you can take a different approach than when you need 2,000 people basically coordinating and 75 stakeholders across the business curious about how things are going to go, and you have one centralized budget for all the people building stuff. It happens. I don't think that's ideal, but it happens. So anyway, we started talking about connecting the dots and how, how teams think about connecting such strategy. The first thing is you do have to think about your company strategy. What are we trying to do here? What are our goals? How are things evolving? Because that's going to have a heavy influence on how you design this system. The next thing is you have to start first with interactions and rituals and decisions and required context. If you don't understand how people need to work together and how that may or may not be constrained by the current organizational chart, it's going to be impossible for you to think about. You can't just draw a pretty Miro table or chart and be done, because that's only a small part of it. How people interact is a huge part of it. And then finally, you need to seek graceful consistency where needed, right? You can't force everyone to work the exact same way. You need to think about what is the smallest number of consistent things we need in this particular setting to make it work. And finally, we mentioned tools a little bit. They should work for you, not you for the tools. So, that spreadsheet doom loop with tools, that doesn't help a company. It just wastes a lot of time. So really, you need to orchestrate or instrument a viable operating system, but start with the operating system, not start with the tools. Hopefully this was helpful.